Our lesson this morning is going to be in the book of Romans. And so if you have your Bible with you, I would invite you to open there to the book of Romans. This text that Greg just shared with us is going to be a primary text for our consideration. We are starting a new series this morning, and it is titled 6 Chapters That Will Change Your Life. And they are all going to be centered in the book of Romans. And this is our first lesson in that series. If you want to know what the book of Romans is mainly about, you will find it in that opening chapter in verses 16 and 17. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Here is the message. For it is the power of God. This is authority in action. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. There is our reception of that message, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it, in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. Grasping that, understanding that, will change your life. Our 6 chapters in this series are going to have to do with God, salvation, and righteousness. The difference that makes in our lives. Our first chapter in the series is Romans chapter 1 and has to do with the existence of God. And this is the first step in the things that will change your life. Not everyone believes it. Everybody ought to. There is nobody who has an excuse for not believing in the existence of God. This chapter is going to look primarily at the Gentile world, non-Jews, not given the law of Moses, not part of the physical family of Abraham, but the rest of the world. This is looking at the Gentile world specifically. What did they know about God? What did God reveal to them? What should we know about God? And what should our response be? And what will happen if we reject what we should know about God? Well, in chapter 1, they rejected the evidence about God. What happened to them? And as you read through Romans chapter 1, you find a people, the Gentile world, that lived a very dark and destructive life. Their thinking was distorted. Their morality sunk to an animal-like living. And the chapter closes with a catalog of sins of what life was like among them. And that was just the beginning of what happens when anyone rejects what they should know about God. That's just the beginning of it, because beyond that there's the judgment day and there is eternity on the horizon. And it will continue there. So we begin to look at this, and we should learn from what they should have known about God, what we can know about God, what everybody should know about Him, and what happens if we reject it, what happens if we accept it. So we have a choice in front of us. In verse 18, you have the wrath of God revealed. But in verse 17, you have the righteousness of God revealed. If you accept what you can know about God and make the appropriate choice based on that, then in that righteousness you'll share in it, you'll live by faith, and you'll be blessed in eternity. But if you choose to reject God, then your lot of life will be much like the description of those in the end of Romans chapter 1, and eternity will not be what you wish it was when you finally arrive there at the judgment day. God's wrath is going to be brought against those who choose to reject Him. The reason that some were rejecting the information about God, they were suppressing it in unrighteousness. They didn't want to be accountable to the true and living God. They didn't want to be responsible to live any other way than the way they wanted to live. They had a mind to do those things that pleased the flesh. And so if they reject God, now they feel that they're not accountable to God. They suppress the truth in unrighteousness. They live the way that they want to live. And that's the reason that our text tells us they rejected it. All right, I want to begin to look at the evidence that was given to them. And that is creation itself. This is the main heart of this lesson. The QR code you see on the screen behind me will take you to an 8-lesson video series at World Video Bible School by Jeff Miller on science versus evolution. And if you have not viewed that material, I wish you would take a look at that. Each lesson might be 25 to 35 or 36 minutes long. There are 8 of them. They are worth the watching. He also has a book out by the same title, and maybe you got the book on your shelf at home, and if not, that would be something worth getting. So I've given you a link to that where you can find more information about it. Now, if you think back about 40 years, some of you can't because you're not 40. But if you can think back about 40 years, there was a movie came out called The Never-Ending Story. And those of you who've seen it, those of you who remember seeing that, will remember a fictional place called Fantasia. And Fantasia was being disintegrated by the Nothing. The Nothing was sweeping through the land. It was eating up Fantasia. There would be absolutely nothing left after it. And there was a boy in the story, and he was given the task to save Fantasia. And in the end of the story, as you get down to the end of it, the only thing that remained of Fantasia was a single grain of sand. And from that, he was going to rebuild Fantasia. I want you to imagine there's no grain of sand. I want you to imagine, and I don't think you can. I can't. I have a hard time imagining this. But I want you to imagine there's absolutely nothing. There is no air, there is no wind, there is no moisture, there is no sound, there is no atmosphere, there is not a single atom, not a neutron, electron, proton, not even a quark. There's absolutely nothing at all. No time, no space, no matter. That's hard to imagine, isn't it? But if you can imagine that, if you can struggle with it, here's the big question. Can something come from nothing? And if it can, I'd like you to explain it. I would like you, because all of science cannot explain it. The theory of evolution cannot explain it. The mind of man cannot explain it. Explain to me how something can come from nothing. What should they have known? Romans chapter 1. Everything we can know about God concerning His divine nature, His eternal power, His Godhead, everything, the invisible attributes of God, they are known. They are clearly seen. They are visible. They are understandable by the things that have been made. Since the creation of the world, since the existence of the universe, the invisible attributes of God, His eternal power, His divine nature, it is clearly seen. We can know that. We can understand that. There is evidence all around us about it. But can you explain to me, without God, how something can come from nothing? Now, that's a pretty tough question. There are scientific laws and there are scientific theories. And there's a world of difference between them. Because a law means this is proven. This is known. This has no exceptions. This applies across the material universe. This galaxy, next galaxy, every galaxy. This is a law. This is a scientific law. There are no exceptions to it. A theory is a guess that needs to be proven. So think about evolutionary theory as versus scientific laws. There are laws of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is about physical science. It is the relationship between all forms of energy. There are laws of thermodynamics, no exceptions in all the material universe. The suggestion is this: more than that, the law is this. In a closed system, and evolution maintains this is a closed system. Imagine a cube. It is absolutely closed. There's nothing outside the cube. There's only the cube. And in this cube, that nothing can get in and nothing can get out. In a closed system, energy is neither created nor destroyed. Nothing can be put into it and nothing can come out of it. It's a closed system, and everything that's in there has to always be in there. And nothing's coming into it from the outside, nothing's escaping beyond it. It's a closed system. And energy is neither created nor destroyed. It will change form. Energy will change form. You got a log, you put it on a fire, you burn it up. There's energy in that log. You put it on the fire, it burned, now it's ash and now it's heat. It changed form, but you didn't destroy it. It's just in a different form. The second law of thermodynamics is a little different. The energy in the closed system remains constant. It changes form, but in the second law, that changing of form becomes less usable. You can burn a log. You can go out to the store and you'll see outside some stores there's logs out there. You can buy a pack of that, take it home and burn it. A log is energy. You can put it on your fire and you can burn it, but after you burn it, that energy's out there. It's changed form. Now try to harness that. Now try to get that. Now try to reuse that. It's harder. It's less usable. That's the second law of thermodynamics. Our universe is constantly changing as it uses energy, and it's becoming more disorderly. Everything in the material universe becomes more disorderly. We have to try to keep up with it. If you want to talk about the human body moves toward disorder. A house, a car, a yard, whatever it is, leave it alone. Don't do anything to it. It moves to disorder. You can have a house pristine, brand new, leave it there for 30 years, come back to it, and you will find disorder. Things that need to be fixed. Second law of thermodynamics. A third law is the law of cause and effect. Listen carefully to the wording. For every material effect, there must be an adequate cause that existed prior to the effect. This universe is an effect. What was there prior to the effect? Where did it come from? How did it get here? If I clap my hands, I thought about doing this, but I thought if I get a really good clap, I'm going to deafen people. But suppose I clap my hands as loud as I can. That does not make an earthquake that shakes the foundations of the homes of a community. We had an earthquake, right? Some of you woke up during that in the middle of the night. You felt that. That wasn't from somebody clapping their hands in your neighborhood. There has to be an adequate cause that made that happen. What made the universe? A theory of evolution says, well, it came from this little cosmic egg. It came from this, well, you couldn't even see it. It was that compact. You couldn't see it with the naked eye. It was that small. It was that dense. It was that compact. And that exploded in a big bang, and it made everything in the universe. They're telling you there was a clapping of the hands, and it shook the foundations of everything. And those who buy into the theory of evolution look at that and nod yes and go, yeah, that makes sense. I'm amazed at that. And where did this little cosmic egg, where did it come from? Where did it come from? Have to explain where it came from. And it doesn't do that. A theory is a guess. It is unproven. Did the universe, spontaneously create itself? And they'll throw out billions upon billions upon billions of years and give you all this time, and somehow it spontaneously created itself. Can something come from nothing? Is that possible? First law of thermodynamics would be violated. We know that for sure. There's no exceptions to it in the material universe. Something cannot come from nothing. Energy does not get introduced into it, nor is it taken out of it. It remains constant, though it becomes less usable over time. So over the billions and billions and billions and billions of years, it would become less usable, more disorder, not more orderly. The universe is winding down, not winding up. So where did it come from? If mass, matter, and energy spontaneously generated, we violate that first law. Something came from nothing, and that's impossible. Is the universe eternal? The idea came up of an oscillating universe. What about an oscillating universe? So I've got this yo-yo. And they make the universe like a yo-yo. Now watch me. Down it goes. How's it get back up? I do that. Down, up, down. Well, that's the universe. It goes out there, it big bang, and it expands, and there it goes, like the yo-yo going down the string. And it's expanding, and when it runs out of expanding energy, then it collapses on itself. But notice the yo-yo can't come back up without me exerting force on it. And it won't keep going without that. But there's a problem with that. We can't have an oscillating universe, because the second law of thermodynamics would be violated. The universe is running down, energy is becoming less usable, and the process is irreversible. You cannot reverse that and make it start over again. That's not the way the law works. It violates that. Science, in coming up with a theory of evolution, is violating laws that it already knows about. And it's making it up as they go along and changing it. Every time somebody pins that down, they change it. And it's a constantly evolving theory of evolution, because it knows it's violating known laws. And every time they're caught in that, they move it a little bit. And so it's not a universe that spontaneously created itself, nor is it an oscillating universe that keeps renewing its energy, because that violates the second law of thermodynamics. There's an undeniable conclusion. It has to do with the law of cause and effect. Something now exists, and that demands something existed forever that caused it to be. You're getting toward the answer of God. God answers all of these problems. Something with eternal properties had to be the source of the material universe with temporal properties. Something eternal had to exist to introduce and start that which is temporary. Something of adequate cause had to be there to make that happen. That's the law of cause and effect. And somebody will say, by the way, that means the universe, unlike the theory of evolution, is not a closed system. It's an open system. And God's the one who created it, and He's the one who entered into the realm, made the realm, and made it what it is, and introduced the energy, the matter, the space, the time to begin with. He's the one who did that. The objection is, well, if every effect must have an adequate cause prior to the effect, well, where did God come from? That's the rebuttal of the evolutionist. Okay, you're saying we can't have our cosmic egg. You saying that had to come from somewhere, and you say God did it. So where'd God come from? Now you Christian, you explain that. Where did God come from? And we say God's eternal. And they say, well, we say our cosmic egg is eternal. What's the difference? Here's the difference. Listen closely to the law of cause and effect. For every material effect, there must be an adequate cause that existed prior to the effect. John 4:24, God is spirit, not material. The law does not apply to God. The law of cause and effect does not apply to God. He exists outside of the law. He's the one who made the law. But He is outside of the material universe. The law of cause and effect has to do with the material universe. But God is spirit. He's not bound by the laws of time, space, matter. There was a simple verse. I remember I was in my late teens the first time I heard it. And I'll tell you, I didn't understand it when I first heard it. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't really know why it was important, but that it was being made important. And I really didn't get it, but now I get it. The first time I heard this, as a teenager, was describing a simple verse in the Bible about the introduction of time, space, and matter. It was done in the Jewel Miller Visualized Bible Study Series all the way back in 1956. And in the first lesson of the 5 lessons in that series, there was a discussion of Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, time. God, force, created energy, the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. The explanation of the beginning. The explanation of all things. What should they have known? What are we supposed to know? Romans 1:20, for since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. It's self-evident. There's no other explanation. There's no other way. There's no other answer. Not only did God provide the evidence of His eternal power, divine nature, and power through the creation, but the very design of it, the functionality of it, is another testimony to God as Creator. When we get over into 1 Corinthians chapter 15, there is a discussion there of creation, and we'll read this. All flesh is not the same flesh. But there's one flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another flesh of birds, and another of fish. There are also heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. But the glory of the heavenly is one, the glory of the earthly is another. There's a glory of the sun, there's another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. For star differs from star in glory. And the point of that text, the point of that passage is that God made everything exactly fitted for its purpose, whole and complete, functioning from the beginning. And as you look at creation, as you look at the universe, as you look at the food chain, the rain cycle, the seasons, gravity, the human body, the hand, the eye, the brain, there is nothing about that can evolve over billions of years from one cell to two cells to this to sea to land to walking. There's nothing about that makes any sense. It all had to be whole and complete at the same time, or everything would be destructive, chaotic. It had to be complete in the beginning for it to work. So you have creation itself, no other explanation that will agree with the laws of thermodynamics, the law of cause and effect, the law of biogenesis. Life comes from existing life. Life does not come from non-life. And so the evidence is undeniable. And God has an explanation in our text, or an expectation in our text. Romans 1, beginning in verse 18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because they want to live by their own say-so, because they want to do what they want to do. They want to please their flesh. And the wrath of God is revealed against people who suppress what can be known about God because they want to live that way. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, or some translations may say among them, for God made it evident to them. How did He do that? For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, the things that we can't see, the things that we can't know about God, His invisible attributes, His eternal power, His divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse. Romans 1, 16 and 17, salvation and righteousness is revealed through the gospel message. And the expectation is faith. The just shall live by faith. There is salvation to everyone who believes. What do you mean? The just shall live by faith. You mean just faith? No, I mean the just shall live by faith. You put faith, you put understanding, you put belief and conviction about the evidence God has given. You put it into living behavior. You obey. The just shall live by faith. That's the expectation of God. His wrath is revealed for those who reject the evidence. The wrath of God begins in this life. Romans 1:24, God gave them over to the lusts of their hearts to impurity. Verse 26, God gave them over to the degrading passions they wanted so much. Verse 28, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. He gave them over to it. And then in the end of the chapter, you have this horrible lifestyle that they were living. It's miserable, it's self-destructive, it has no hope. And the wrath of God will continue in judgment day and beyond into eternity. But it begins right here in this life. The lesson series is about the existence or the things that will change your life. 6 chapters. First lesson about the existence of God. Watch the videos in the QR code. Get the book. Just look into it a little bit. Paul was on his second missionary journey in Athens. And he's reasoning with those Gentiles. They're in a city full of idols. They say God is all sorts of things. And they have idols on every corner and in between. More idols and gods than there were people. They were all over the place. And Paul begins to reason with them. And part of the reasoning begins in Acts 17 and verse 24. The God who made the world and all things in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is He served by human hands as though He needed anything, since He Himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. He is the source of life. He is the source of the world. He created all things. He's the source. He doesn't need us to sustain Him. We need Him to sustain us. And made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God. The point, the reason of creation, of the evidence that's there, is that man would seek God. If perhaps they might grope for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. For in Him we live and move and exist, even as some of your own poets have said, for we also are His children. Genesis 1:1 is more powerful than people think it is. The evidence in Romans chapter 1 is there for all to see. Paul reasoned with the pagans at Athens in the same way. It is the evidence that should cause us to seek God. Evolution is perhaps the greatest hoax that has ever been played on this planet. And how people can believe in the theory that is unproven and deny the evidence all around them of God is dumbfounding. If you desire to respond to the gospel, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes without discrimination. The just shall live by faith. It's going to change the way that you live. If you desire to obey the gospel this morning, you can choose to do that. You can admit the evidence that's there. And this can be the beginning to the changing of your life. We have a lot more to say. We'll move on next week to Romans chapter 2, and then to chapter 3. And then to chapter 6, and then to chapter 12, and then to chapter 16. And they are 6 chapters that will change your life. Unless you want to go on suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. But I trust better things of you, and perhaps there's even a Christian who once obeyed the gospel and then has fallen away, compromised. Maybe thinking about this will renew your faith in the true and living God and bring you home in repentance. Whatever your need may be, if you need to come, please come forward while we stand and sing.